Hi guys, we are going to start our Holocaust literature unit. This is one of my least favorite units to teach because it is just really hard. A lot of times it's a lot of the students' favorite part of the year because they just find this period of history really interesting, and the hope and resiliency of humanity really does come to light as you look at the literature from the Holocaust. So just to give you a little bit of background, we're talking about something that happened January 30th in 1933 when Hitler became the Chancellor of Germany, and ended about May 8th, 1945, which is called VE Day, and it was the Victory Day in Europe. So since this isn't what I'm crazy about, why are we actually doing it? I do get to pick what we look at, but there's a lot of important concepts that can stay with us for the rest of our lives when we read this literature. So these are the things that we want you to understand. This is the outcome. We want you to understand that we can distance ourselves from political, religious, and social tragedy by categorizing other people as others. That's other people. That's not people like us. That's not our country. That literature, we want you to understand that literature is only one account of history. And especially if we're reading a particular novel or a story, that's only going to give us one perspective of the story. But we really should be careful and try to get the whole truth from literature. So you shouldn't read one thing, and this is the next. Understanding a historical event from one point of view might create a single story, and it's best to synthesize understanding from different perspectives. So you don't want to read one thing and say, this is how things were. You want to read many things and then make your own decisions. And then finally, that tragedy can both harm and strengthen families and societies. So the Holocaust, what Holocaust means is it's the complete destruction of a large number of persons. In Hebrew, this word means a great and terrible win. And the definition is that the Holocaust was a genocide by Nazi Germany between 1933 and 1945 to make the world cleansed of Jews. So the point was to end all Jewish people in the world. That was Hitler's end goal. A genocide is the deliberate and systematic extermination of a national, racial, political, or cultural group. And at any given time, there are 3 to 5 genocides happening in the world. When I looked it up last week, there were 5 genocides that were considered active genocides happening in the world today. They don't have the numbers that the Holocaust had, and I think that's why we don't hear about them. But if you follow the news, you will see different genocides happening, and it will be hundreds, if not thousands, of people being killed by their government or by a group of people who decided that those other people should not have the opportunity to be alive anymore. So when we read the Holocaust literature, you hear the word anti-Semite or anti-Semitism. That means that's prejudice and discrimination against Jews or against the Jewish people. This photo was taken in the 1990s. There are still lots of anti-Semitic sentiments in the world today. So it's not something that ended with the Holocaust and is gone and we're in a happy, wonderful place. We are in a much, much better place. It doesn't happen as much, and Jewish people tend to be safer and more protected by laws, but there definitely is still anti-Semitism existing in the world. So I'm not going to read through all of these because you can pause and read through them, but there's Jewish people were accused of causing the Black Death by poisoning wells. That was 1348. In Russia in 1881, there were programs that killed Jewish people. So this is well before the 1933. In 1897, there was a person who was teaching that Germans were a superior race and Jews were a slave race, and he founded a League of Anti-Semitism. And then, of course, in 1941, Hitler came out with the final solution, and that was to murder all the Jews in Europe. So when we talk about 6 million Jewish people who were killed and about 20 million people total killed in the Holocaust, what does 6 million look like? It looks like the entire population of Dallas, the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So Fort Worth, all through the airport area, and all of Dallas, all of those people. That would be about the number of people. About 24 Lubbocks, and about 113 filling the Jones Stadium 113 times. So just to kind of give you a perspective of how many people we're talking about. So who was Hitler? He was a guy who rose to power after World War I, and Germany was in a horrible recession, partially because they were defeated in World War I. He was named the chancellor, which is the most powerful position, kind of like president. He promised to return Germany to greatness under his rule. A lot of the German people were out of jobs. People were suffering. And he came in and said, I will bring us back to the powerhouse that we once were, and I can make this happen. He was the leader of a right-wing National Socialist German Workers' Party, which was called the Nazi Party. So the Nazis were a political party, and you'll still hear that word a lot today, but a lot of people don't know, I think, that it was actually a political party. And once in power, Hitler moved to end German democracy. So he pretty quickly came in and put things in place to where he took over, and it wasn't a democracy anymore where he could be voted out. It wasn't, he made himself the supreme chancellor, and anyone who could have other power, he systematically took them out of power. So the anti-Semitism that was growing, the Jewish population accounted for less than 1% of the German population. So it was only 525,000 Jewish people in Germany when Hitler took power. But the Nazi Party identified the Jews as a race, and he defined their race as inferior. So they spewed a lot of hate-mongering propaganda, and we'll talk about what propaganda is and what that means and kind of how that works. And they unfairly blamed the Jews for the economic depression. So how did the Nazis know who was Jewish? Okay, so that's one of the things a lot of people say, well, I just would have pretended not to be Jewish. Well, there was a census that had a race category in 1933, which was when it was all getting started, so it hadn't started yet, and the Jews were forced to register their religion. And they did that before they knew it was going to be deadly to do that. Their clothes, their habits, and their practices made them look different. They have certain dietary needs and decisions, and so that made them different. They went to churches, which are synagogues in the Jewish society, and temples. Those places, just like any church, kept birth, marriage, and death records. So when they were, when the Nazis came into power, they just needed to go into the churches and take those documents. Neighbors and friends turned them in because they could claim rewards, and also because they were threatened if they didn't turn in Jews. They had ID cards with a J on it after the Nuremberg laws went into effect. They were made to carry these, and later they were required to wear these yellow stars on all their outer clothing so that they could be identified by sight. And here's an example of a Jewish ID card. So they were easily identified. And then finally, this is our last slide. How was Hitler able to fool good people to hate Jews? So, we know that most of the people in Germany were good people. And so why were they part of this? And it was a systematic decision that the Nazis made to go through the levels of prejudice and escalate a growing prejudice. That prejudice can be as easy as laughing at a racial joke. They taught children systematically to not like Jews by creating cartoons, by teaching them that these people were bad, that they were dirty, that they carried disease. They got the youth in Hitler Youth, again, which was where they systematically taught people, slowly but deliberately, that other people were inferior to them and that they were better. So we're going to do a web quest to get you a little bit more background information, but this is kind of an overview. And this is the perspective or the framing, and you are going to read two novels. You're going to read Night, and you're going to read a Litsuko book. And with those two novels, you're going to be able to get a decent perspective of what went on during that time.